The scorching sun beat down on Sophia Clarke's exposed neck as she knelt by the creek, her trembling fingers attempting to fill her canteen with the cool, clear water that trickled between the sun-bleached rocks. It was her third day alone on the trail to Las Lunas, New Mexico, and the August heat of 1875 was proving to be more merciless than she had anticipated when she'd left Santa Fe. "Just a little farther," she whispered to herself, the words cracking in her dry throat. Her mare, Penny, nickered softly from where she was tethered to a nearby cottonwood, seeming as eager as Sophia to continue toward their destination. Sophia had come west following the death of her parents in Boston, determined to start fresh as a schoolteacher in the growing town of Las Lunas. As she rose to her feet, the movement disturbed something in the tall grass beside the creek. The warning rattle came too late. The snake struck with lightning speed, its fangs sinking deep into Sophia's ankle just above her boot. She screamed, stumbling backward and falling hard onto the rocky ground. The rattlesnake, a large specimen with distinctive diamond patterns, slithered away into the brush, leaving Sophia clutching at her leg, her heart racing with terror. "No, no, no," she gasped, panic rising in her chest as a burning pain began to radiate from the two small puncture wounds. She knew enough about rattlesnake bites to understand the gravity of her situation. Without treatment, the venom would spread through her system, potentially causing her death in the isolated wilderness. Sophia tried to stand but fell again as dizziness swept over her. Las Lunas was still at least 10 miles away, and she knew of no doctor closer. Tears stung her eyes as she realized how utterly alone she was. Her vision began to blur at the edges as the venom took effect, and the burning at the bite site intensified to an excruciating degree. "Help!" she called out weakly, knowing the futility of her cries in the vast, empty landscape. "Somebody, please help me!" Her mare shifted nervously, sensing her distress. Sophia crawled toward her saddlebag, thinking desperately of her small medical kit, but knowing it contained nothing that would help with a snake bite of this severity. The sound of approaching hoofbeats seemed at first like a hallucination born of desperation. But as they grew louder, Sophia realized someone was coming. She raised her head, squinting against the sun to make out the silhouette of a rider approaching from the west. "Help!" She called again, her voice stronger this time, fueled by a desperate hope. The rider spurred his horse faster, and within moments, a tall man dismounted in a fluid motion beside her. His face was partially shadowed by a worn leather hat, but Sophia could see concern etched in his sun-weathered features. "Madam, what happened?" His deep voice was steady, calming. "Rattlesnake," Sophia managed, gesturing weakly toward her ankle where the puncture wounds were now surrounded by angry red swelling. "It bit me, just minutes ago." The man knelt beside her, pushing back his hat to reveal piercing blue eyes that quickly assessed her condition. "I'm Finn O'Malley," he said, already reaching for her injured leg. "I work cattle at the Reynolds Ranch outside Las Lunas." His strong, calloused hands gently examined the bite, his expression growing grave. "The venom's spreading fast," he noted. "There's no doctor for miles." Sophia felt cold fear grip her heart despite the burning heat of her leg. "Am I going to die?" she whispered. Finn's eyes met hers with determined confidence. "Not if I can help it, miss." "Clarke. Sophia Clarke," she replied, wincing as a fresh wave of pain washed over her. "Miss Clarke, I need to draw the poison out. It's your best chance." His hands were already working, removing a knife from his belt. "This is going to hurt, but it might save your life." Sophia stared at him, trying to gauge if she could trust this stranger with her life. Something in his steady gaze and capable movements convinced her she had no better option. "Do it," she whispered. Finn nodded. using his bandana to create a tourniquet above the bite. With precise movements, he made a small X-shaped incision over each fang mark. Blood, darker than it should be, oozed from the cuts. "I'm going to have to suck the venom out," he explained, his eyes serious. "Let me." Before she could respond, he lowered his mouth to her ankle, creating suction over the wound. The pain was intense, but Sophia remained conscious, watching as this stranger worked to save her life. He would spit to the side, then return to draw more of the poisoned blood from her wound. The process continued for what seemed like hours but was likely only minutes. Finally, Finn sat back on his heels, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I think I got most of it," he said, "but we need to get you to Las Lunas. You'll need rest and care." Sophia tried to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. The world tilted alarmingly, and she felt herself falling into darkness. When consciousness returned, Sophia found herself cradled against a firm chest, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats beneath her. She was on a horse, held securely by strong arms. Her ankle throbbed dully, but the burning sensation had lessened. "Mr. O'Malley," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I'm here," came his reassuring reply. "You're going to be all right, Miss Clarke. We're heading to Las Lunas. My horse is stronger, but I've got your mare following behind." Sophia tried to shift to see his face, but found herself too weak. "Thank you," she managed. "You saved my life." "Don't thank me yet," he said, his voice rumbling in the chest she was pressed against. "We've still got to get that leg properly treated. The venom's still in your system, just less of it now." They rode in silence for a time, Sophia drifting in and out of awareness. The landscape passed in a blur of brown and gold, the endless sky above them a deep, relentless blue. "What brings you to these parts alone?" Finn asked eventually, perhaps to keep her conscious. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Las Lunas," Sophia replied, her voice stronger than before. "I came from Boston after my parents passed." "That's a long way to travel alone," Finn observed, no judgment in his tone, only a hint of admiration. "I didn't have much choice," she admitted. "And I needed a fresh start." Finn nodded, adjusting his grip to keep her secure as they navigated a steeper section of trail. "Las Lunas is a good place for that. Rough around the edges but growing. They'll be glad to have a proper teacher." As they crested a hill, Sophia could make out the scattered buildings of a town in the distance. Las Lunas looked small from here, but it represented everything she'd been hoping for, a new beginning, a place to build something of her own. "Almost there," Finn said. "Mrs. Hernandez at the boarding house will help get you settled. She's got remedies for most everything, including snake bites." Sophia felt an unexpected reluctance at the thought of parting from this man who had so suddenly become her rescuer. "Will I see you again?" she asked, immediately regretting the forwardness of her question. There was a pause before he answered, and she could feel rather than see his smile. "I reckon you will, Miss Clarke. Las Lunas isn't big enough to avoid anybody for long." As they approached the town, Sophia noticed people stopping to stare at them. A woman riding in a cowboy's arms was clearly not an everyday sight, even in a frontier town. Finn guided his horse directly to a two-story building with a sign proclaiming it Hernandez Boarding House. Before they even reached the hitching post, a stout woman with graying black hair appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Finn O'Malley, what trouble have you brought me now?" she called, though her tone was more concerned than accusatory. "Snake bite, Mrs. Hernandez," Finn replied, carefully dismounting while still supporting Sophia. "This is Miss Clarke, your new schoolteacher. She had a run-in with a rattler about 10 miles east." Mrs. Hernandez's expression shifted immediately to one of alarm. "Bring her inside quickly," she directed, holding the door open. "Roberto," she called to a young boy nearby. "Take care of their horses." Finn carried Sophia into the boarding house and, following Mrs. Hernandez's directions, placed her on a bed in a small but clean ground floor room. "I drew out what poison I could," he explained as Mrs. Hernandez examined the wound, "but she'll need proper tending." The older woman nodded, already gathering supplies from a cabinet. "You did well, Finn. Now go fetch some fresh water from the well while I get her comfortable." Finn hesitated, looking at Sophia with concern in his eyes. "You'll be all right now, Miss Clarke. Mrs. Hernandez is the best healer this side of Santa Fe." Sophia reached out and caught his hand. "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. I owe you my life." A flush crept up his neck, visible even beneath his tan. "Anyone would have done the same," he said, gently extricating his hand. "I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." After he left, Mrs. Hernandez helped Sophia out of her dusty traveling clothes and into a borrowed nightgown. The older woman applied a poultice of herbs to the bite, wrapping it carefully. "That cowboy saved your life," Mrs. Hernandez remarked as she worked. "Finn O'Malley is one of the good ones. Keeps to himself mostly, but always there when someone needs help." "He appeared out of nowhere," Sophia said, the memory already taking on a dreamlike quality as exhaustion overtook her. "Like an angel," Mrs. Hernandez chuckled. "I wouldn't let him hear you call him that. Now drink this," she said, offering a cup of bitter-smelling tea. "It will help with the pain and draw out any remaining poison." Sophia drank obediently, grimacing at the taste. As the medicine took effect, she felt herself drifting toward sleep, her last conscious thought of blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn leather hat. The next few days passed in a haze of fever and pain. Mrs. Hernandez was a constant presence, changing poultices, administering herbal remedies, and helping Sophia eat small amounts of broth when she was lucid enough. True to his word, Finn came to check on her the next day. Sophia was barely conscious, but she was aware of his presence, of his deep voice conferring with Mrs. Hernandez, and the gentle touch of his hand on her forehead, testing for fever. On the third day, Sophia awoke feeling significantly improved. The swelling in her ankle had gone down, and though still tender, the angry red coloration had faded to a more natural bruise. She managed to sit up in bed just as Mrs. Hernandez entered with a tray of food. "Ah, you're looking much better today," the older woman said approvingly. "The fever broke last night. I think you'll live, Miss Clarke." "Thank you for taking care of me," Sophia said sincerely, accepting the tray which held a bowl of hearty stew and fresh bread. "And please call me Sophia." Mrs. Hernandez smiled, pulling a chair closer to the bed. "You can thank me by eating every bite. You need your strength." As Sophia ate, Mrs. Hernandez filled her in on what she had missed. "The school board members stopped by yesterday. They're relieved you arrived safely or mostly safely and said to tell you that school isn't set to begin for another 2 weeks, so you have time to recover." "That's a relief," Sophia admitted. "I was worried about starting late." "Oh, and Finn O'Malley has been by every day to check on you, Mrs. Hernandez added with a knowing smile. "He brought your things from your horse and made sure everything was properly stored." Sophia felt a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with her recent fever. "That was very kind of him. He's due by again this afternoon, Mrs. Hernandez said, rising to her feet. "I'll tell him you're feeling better." True to Mrs. Hernandez's prediction, Finn arrived later that day, knocking softly on the open door of Sophia's room. He had removed his hat and his dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd just washed up. He was holding a small bundle of wildflowers. "Miss Clarke," he said, a smile lighting his weather-worn face. "It's good to see you sitting up." "Mr. O'Malley," Sophia returned, suddenly conscious of her appearance after days of illness. Please come in." He stepped into the room, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the domestic setting. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "Nothing fancy, just some I spotted on the ride-in." "They're beautiful," Sophia said sincerely, accepting them. Their simple beauty and sweet fragrance were a welcome change from the medicinal smells that had surrounded her. "Thank you." Mrs. Hernandez appeared with a small jar of water for the flowers, giving Finn a pointed look that Sophia couldn't quite interpret. "I'll leave you two to chat," the older woman said. "But not too long, Finn. Miss Clarke needs her rest." After Mrs. Hernandez left, Finn took the seat beside Sophia's bed, his large frame making the small chair look comically inadequate. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his blue eyes studying her with genuine concern. "Much better, thanks to you and Mrs. Hernandez," Sophia replied. "I don't know how to repay you for what you did." Finn shook his head. "There's no debt between us, Miss Clarke. I'm just glad I happened along when I did." "Sophia," she said impulsively. "Please call me Sophia." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Sophia," he repeated, the name sounding different in his voice. "Then I insist you call me Finn." They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Finn told her about the Reynolds Ranch where he worked as a foreman, about the town of Las Lunas and its inhabitants, and about his 8 years in New Mexico Territory since leaving his family's failed farm in Missouri. In turn, Sophia shared stories of Boston, of her parents passing from influenza the previous winter, and of her decision to accept the teaching position in Las Lunas, a place she'd only known from correspondence. "It was brave, making such a journey alone," Finn remarked. Sophia smiled ruefully. "Or foolish, considering how it nearly ended. Life out here requires a measure of both bravery and foolishness," Finn replied with a chuckle. "You'll fit right in." When Mrs. Hernandez eventually returned to shoo him away, Sophia found herself reluctant to see him go. "Will you come again tomorrow?" she asked as he rose to leave. "If you'd like," he said, placing his hat back on his head. "Though I should warn you, I'm poor company compared to the folks you'll meet once you're up and about." "I disagree," Sophia said simply. "I've enjoyed our conversation very much." A pleased expression crossed his face, though he tried to hide it. "Until tomorrow, then," he said with a slight bow and departed. True to his word, Finn returned the next day and the day after that. As Sophia grew stronger, their visits lengthened. On the 6th day after the snake bite, Mrs. Hernandez declared that Sophia could try walking around the boarding house. Finn arrived just as Sophia was making her first tentative steps into the parlor, leaning heavily on Mrs. Hernandez's arm. Her ankle was still tender, but the wound was healing well. "Look at you," Finn said admiringly. "Up and about already." Sophia smiled, though it turned to a wince as she put too much weight on her injured ankle. Finn was immediately at her other side, offering his arm for support. "Easy now," he said. "No need to rush it." With Finn's strong support, Sophia managed to walk around the parlor twice before needing to rest. As she settled into a chair, she noticed the way Finn's eyes lingered on her, a warmth in them that sent a flutter through her chest. Over the next week, Sophia continued to regain her strength. Finn visited daily, often arriving with small gifts, a book from the general store, fresh peaches from a nearby orchard, or simply news from around the territory. Each visit deepened their connection, and Sophia found herself looking forward to seeing him more than anything else. 2 weeks after the snake bite, Sophia was nearly fully recovered and preparing to begin her duties as the town's schoolteacher. The small schoolhouse at the edge of town had been cleaned and prepared for her arrival, and she had spent several days organizing books and planning lessons. On the evening before school was to begin, Finn arrived at the boarding house dressed more formally than Sophia had ever seen him, in a clean shirt with no trail dust to be seen. "I thought you might like to see a bit more of Las Lunas before you're surrounded by children all day," he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. "Mrs. Hernandez said you're well enough for a short walk." Sophia readily agreed, and they set off down the main street of Las Lunas, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Finn pointed out the various establishments: the general store, the blacksmith, the small church, and the sheriff's office. Las Lunas was smaller than Santa Fe, but it had a bustling energy that spoke of growth and opportunity. "And there," Finn said, pointing to a small building with a freshly painted sign, "is the pride of Las Lunas, our very own newspaper office. Started just last year." As they walked, several townspeople greeted them, curious eyes taking in the new schoolteacher and her cowboy escort. Sophia noticed that Finn was well respected in town. People nodded to him with genuine regard. They eventually made their way to a small rise overlooking the town, where a single bench had been placed to take advantage of the view. The Rio Grande wound its way through the valley below, gleaming like molten gold in the sunset. "It's beautiful," Sophia said as they sat on the bench. "So different from Boston, but beautiful in its own way." "It grows on you," Finn agreed, his shoulder just barely touching hers. "I never planned to stay this long, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." There was a comfortable silence between them as they watched the sunset. Sophia was acutely aware of Finn beside her, of the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "I'm glad you're staying in Las Lunas," Finn said suddenly, his voice quiet but intense. "I'm glad you survived that snake bite." Sophia turned to face him, finding his blue eyes already on her. "So am I," she replied simply. For a moment it seemed as though he might say more, might lean toward her. But instead he stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We should head back," he said, regret evident in his tone. "You need rest before your first day with the children." Sophia accepted his hand, noticing that he didn't release it immediately as they began walking back toward town. His calloused palm was warm against hers, and she found herself hoping he wouldn't let go. All too soon, they reached the boarding house. On the porch, Finn finally released her hand, stepping back with reluctance. "Good luck tomorrow," he said. "Those children don't know how fortunate they are to have you as their teacher." "Thank you, Finn," Sophia replied, "for everything." He tipped his hat, a gesture she had come to find endearing. "Good night, Sophia." As she watched him walk away, Sophia realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with Finn O'Malley, the cowboy who had drawn the poison from her veins and, in doing so, had somehow worked his way into her heart. The next morning, Sophia stood nervously before 17 children of various ages, from 6-year-olds just beginning their education to teenagers nearly grown. The schoolhouse was simple but functional, with rows of wooden desks facing her teacher's desk and a large slate board mounted on the wall behind her. "Good morning," she began, pleased that her voice sounded steady despite her nerves. "I am Miss Clarke, your new teacher." 28 eyes stared back at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright boredom. Sophia took a deep breath and continued. "I've come a long way to teach in Las Lunas, and I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you. Before we begin our lessons, I'd like you to introduce yourselves and tell me one thing you hope to learn this year." As the children began their introductions, Sophia noticed a girl of about 12 watching her with particular interest. When it was her turn, she stood and said clearly, "I'm Eliza Reynolds. My pa owns the big ranch outside town." She paused, then added, "Finn O'Malley works for my pa. He told us how you got bit by a rattlesnake and he saved your life." A ripple of excited whispers spread through the classroom. Clearly, the story of Sophia's dramatic arrival in Las Lunas had become local gossip. "Is it true he sucked the poison right out of your leg?" a small boy asked, eyes wide. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, Mr. O'Malley did help me when I was bitten by a snake." Now, let's continue with our introductions. By midday, Sophia had managed to establish some semblance of order in the classroom and had begun assessing the children's varied levels of education. Some could barely write their names, while others demonstrated a solid foundation in reading and arithmetic. As the children ate their midday meals in the schoolyard, Sophia remained at her desk, making notes and planning how to address the wide range of needs in her classroom. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the tall figure in the doorway until he cleared his throat. Looking up, she was surprised and pleased to see Finn standing there, hat in hand. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, stepping into the classroom. "Not at all," Sophia assured him, setting down her pencil. "The children are having their lunch outside." Finn nodded, approaching her desk somewhat hesitantly. "I just wanted to see how your first morning was going." "It's going well, I think," Sophia replied. "Though I've already been interrogated about my snake bite and dramatic rescue." Finn winced. "Sorry about that. News travels fast in a small town." "So I'm learning," Sophia said with a smile. "Apparently, you've become quite the hero in their eyes." A flush crept up Finn's neck. "That wasn't my intention." "I know," Sophia said softly. "That's what makes it all the more admirable." Their eyes met across the desk, and Sophia felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Finn opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by the sound of children returning from lunch, their voices carrying through the open windows. "I should go," Finn said, taking a step back. "I just wanted to wish you well on your first day. Will I see you later?" Sophia asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. A slow smile spread across Finn's face. "I'll stop by the boarding house this evening, if that's all right." Before she could reply, the first of the children burst through the door, stopping short at the sight of Finn. It was Eliza Reynolds, and she looked between Finn and Sophia with keen interest. "Mr. O'Malley," she said. "Did you come to see Miss Clarke?" "Just checking that she's settling in all right," Finn replied, his tone casual but his eyes avoiding Sophia's. "Your pa sent me to town for supplies, and I thought I'd stop by." More children filtered in, all staring curiously at the tall cowboy in their schoolhouse. "Is it true you killed the snake after it bit Miss Clarke?" one of the boys asked eagerly. "That's enough questions," Sophia interjected firmly. "Take your seats, please. Mr. O'Malley has work to do." Finn shot her a grateful look as he retreated toward the door. "Good day, Miss Clarke," he said formally. "Children." As he left, Sophia could hear the excited murmurs of her students, and she knew that Finn's visit would only fuel the town's interest in their relationship. Strangely, the thought didn't bother her as much as it perhaps should have. The remainder of the school day passed in a blur of lessons, questions, and the countless small challenges of managing a classroom of children with widely varying abilities and temperaments. By the time Sophia dismissed the class, she was exhausted but exhilarated. Teaching was everything she had hoped it would be, despite the difficulties. She remained at her desk long after the last child had left, organizing materials and planning the next day's lessons. The sun was beginning to set when she finally gathered her things to leave. As she stepped outside and locked the schoolhouse door, she was startled to find Finn waiting, leaning against a hitching post with two horses saddled beside him. "I thought you might like a ride back to town," he said, straightening as she approached. You must be tired after your first full day." Sophia's surprise quickly gave way to pleasure. "That's very thoughtful of you. Besides," Finn added as he helped her mount one of the horses, "I promised to stop by this evening, remember." The ride back to town was brief but pleasant, with Sophia sharing stories of her first day teaching and Finn listening with genuine interest. As they rode side by side, Sophia couldn't help noticing the curious glances from townspeople they passed. Clearly, her association with Finn was becoming a topic of local interest. At the boarding house, Mrs. Hernandez greeted them with a knowing smile. "Dinner's nearly ready," she said. "Finn, you'll stay, of course." It wasn't really a question, and Finn accepted with good grace, helping Sophia down from her horse before tending to both animals. Dinner was a lively affair, with several other boarders joining them at the large table in the dining room. Mrs. Hernandez had prepared a feast of enchiladas, beans, and fresh tortillas. The conversation flowed easily, with much of it focused on Sophia's first day as the town's teacher. "Miss Clarke has already got those children wrapped around her finger," said Mr. Peterson, an elderly boarder who had happened to pass by the schoolhouse that afternoon. "I saw them all lined up neat as pins when school let out. It's a good thing, too," added Mrs. Hernandez. The last teacher only lasted 3 months before fleeing back east. Sophia's eyebrows rose in surprise. No one mentioned that in the correspondence about the position. "Would you have come if they had?" Finn asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. Sophia considered this, then nodded firmly. "Yes, I believe I would have. I came west for a new beginning, challenges and all. Even rattlesnakes," Finn asked with a smile. "Even rattlesnakes," Sophia confirmed, returning his smile. "Though I hope not to repeat that particular experience." After dinner, Finn suggested a short walk to aid digestion. Despite her fatigue, Sophia readily agreed, eager for his company away from curious eyes. They strolled through the quiet streets of Las Lunas as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear in the vast expanse above them. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. "I'm proud of you," Finn said suddenly as they paused beside a small stone wall. "Taking on those children, starting a new life so far from home, it takes courage." Sophia was touched by his words. "I don't feel particularly courageous," she admitted. "Just determined, I suppose." "Determination is its own kind of courage," Finn replied. He hesitated, then added, "My mother had it. She held our family together through some hard times." "You don't speak of your family often," Sophia observed gently. Finn shrugged, his eyes on the distant horizon. "Not much to tell. Pa died when I was 14. Ma and my 2 sisters moved back to Kentucky to live with relatives after we lost the farm. I headed west. Do you write to them?" "When I can," Finn said. "Though I'm not much for letters. Ma says my handwriting looks like chicken scratch." Sophia laughed at that. "Perhaps I could help you write to them sometime," she offered. "It's the least I could do after all you've done for me." Finn turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. "You don't owe me anything, Sophia. I hope you know that." "I do," she said quietly. "That's not why I offered." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Sophia felt her heart quickening. Finn took a small step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling night air. "Sophia," he began, his voice lower than before. "Yes," she prompted when he didn't continue. He seemed to struggle with himself, then took a step back, breaking the moment. "It's getting late. I should get you back to the boarding house." Sophia couldn't quite hide her disappointment, but she nodded. "Of course." They walked back in a silence that was no longer quite comfortable. At the boarding house steps, Finn paused, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "Thank you for the walk," Sophia said, filling the silence between them. My pleasure, Finn replied, then added hurriedly, I'm heading out to the north pasture tomorrow. I'll be gone for a few days, helping with the roundup. Oh, Sophia said, trying not to let her disappointment show. Well, good luck with that. I'll stop by when I get back, he promised, to see how you're getting on with the children. I'd like that, Sophia said sincerely. Finn nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and turned to go. Sophia watched him walk away, wondering what he had been about to say before he'd pulled back. The next few days passed in a blur of teaching, planning, and adjusting to life in Las Lunas. Sophia threw herself into her work, determined to prove herself capable as an educator. The children, while occasionally challenging, were responding well to her methods, and she found herself genuinely enjoying their company. In the evenings, she explored the small town, gradually meeting more of its inhabitants. Everyone was curious about the new schoolteacher, especially after the dramatic circumstances of her arrival. Sophia found herself telling the snake bite story repeatedly, though she always emphasized Finn's quick thinking and bravery. 4 days after their evening walk, Sophia was grading arithmetic exercises at her desk when a knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her concentration. Looking up, she was surprised to see Sheriff Davis, a stocky man with a neatly trimmed mustache whom she'd met only briefly since arriving in town. Miss Clarke, he said, removing his hat as he entered. Sorry to disturb you. Not at all, Sheriff, Sophia replied, setting aside her work. How can I help you? The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, and Sophia felt a sense of foreboding. Is something wrong? She asked. There's been an accident out at the Reynolds Ranch, the sheriff said, his expression grave. Finn O'Malley was thrown from his horse during the roundup. They brought him in to Doc Wilson's place about an hour ago. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Is he? How badly is he hurt? Hard to say for certain, Sheriff Davis replied. Broke his leg, that's for sure, and took a nasty knock to the head. Doc's with him now. Without conscious thought, Sophia was on her feet, gathering her things. Where is Doc Wilson's office? Just down from the general store, the sheriff said. But Miss Clarke, you should know that Finn's not conscious yet. Sophia paused, her hand tightening on her shawl. Thank you for telling me, Sheriff. I'll go there now. The sheriff looked as if he might say something else, perhaps caution her about the propriety of rushing to Finn's side, but he merely nodded and held the door for her as they left the schoolhouse. Doc Wilson's office was a small building with a faded sign proclaiming medical services. As Sophia approached, the door opened, and a tired-looking man with spectacles and thinning gray hair emerged. Dr. Wilson, Sophia called, hurrying toward him. He looked at her with mild surprise. Yes. You must be the new schoolteacher. I am, Sophia Clarke, she confirmed quickly. I heard about Finn O'Malley. How is he? The doctor's expression softened slightly. Ah, I should have guessed. He's been asking for you. Sophia's heart leapt. He's conscious. Just came around about 10 minutes ago, Doc Wilson confirmed. Legs broken clean through and he's got a concussion, but he's a strong man. Should recover fully with time and rest. May I see him? Sophia asked, trying not to sound as desperate as she felt. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly. He needs rest more than anything right now. He led her into the building and through a small waiting area to a room at the back where Finn lay on a narrow bed. His right leg was splinted and bandaged, and a dark bruise spread across his temple. His eyes were closed, but they opened as Sophia entered the room. Sophia, he said, his voice hoarse but clear. You didn't need to come. Of course I did, she replied, moving to his bedside. What happened? Finn grimaced, shifting slightly against the pillows propping him up. Young Stallion spooked at a rattler. Ironic, isn't it? His attempt at humor fell flat as he winced in pain. You should rest, Sophia said, resisting the urge to smooth the hair back from his forehead. I just wanted to see that you were all right. I've had worse, Finn assured her, though his pallor suggested otherwise. Doc says I'll be laid up for a while, though. Mr. O'Malley needs to stay here for at least 2 days, Doc Wilson interjected from the doorway. After that, he'll need somewhere to recover where he can be looked after. The bunkhouse at the ranch isn't suitable. Sophia turned to the doctor. What about the boarding house? Mrs. Hernandez has a ground floor room. That might work, the doctor conceded, if Mrs. Hernandez is willing. I'll speak with her, Sophia promised, turning back to Finn. Don't worry about anything except getting better. Finn's eyes held hers, a complexity of emotions in their blue depths. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I know, Sophia replied simply, but I want to. She stayed for a few more minutes until Doc Wilson insisted that Finn needed rest. As she was leaving, Finn caught her hand. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice heavy with fatigue. Sophia squeezed his hand gently. I'll be back tomorrow after school, she promised. True to her word, Sophia returned the next day, bringing a book to read aloud and news of her students. Finn was more alert, though still clearly in pain despite the laudanum Doc Wilson had prescribed. Eliza Reynolds asked about you today, Sophia told him as she settled into the chair beside his bed. She seems quite worried about you. Finn smiled faintly. She's a good kid, smart as a whip too. She reminds me of you, actually, Sophia observed. That same determined look in her eyes. This drew a genuine laugh from Finn, followed immediately by a wince. Don't tell her father that. He's still not entirely convinced I'm a good influence. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Oh, and why might that be? Finn looked slightly uncomfortable. I may have had a reputation as a bit of a troublemaker when I first came to Las Lunas, he admitted. Nothing serious, just young and foolish. And now, Sophia prompted. Now I'm older and slightly less foolish, Finn replied with a half-smile. At least, I was until I got thrown from that horse. They fell into easy conversation, with Sophia reading from the book she had brought, a collection of Mark Twain's stories that had been a favorite of her father's. Finn listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or commenting on the stories. As the light began to fade outside the small window, Doc Wilson appeared to check on his patient. I've spoken with Mrs. Hernandez, he informed them. She's agreed to take Mr. O'Malley in once I'm satisfied he can be moved, probably the day after tomorrow if the fever doesn't return. Fever? Sophia asked, concerned. Just a slight one last night, Doc Wilson explained. Common with injuries of this sort, it's down now. After the doctor left, Sophia noticed that Finn looked exhausted. I should go, she said, rising from her chair. You need your rest. Finn caught her hand as she stood, much as he had the day before. Sophia, he said, his voice serious. You don't have to look after me. I know you have your students to think about, your new life here. Sophia looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, strong even in injury. Perhaps I'm being selfish, she said softly. Perhaps I want to be the one to help you the way you helped me. Finn's eyes widened slightly at her words. There's nothing selfish about you, Sophia Clarke, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Their gaze held for a long moment, and Sophia felt that same connection that had been growing between them since the day he had drawn the poison from her veins. Impulsively, she leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. Rest well, she whispered, and left before he could respond, her heart pounding in her chest. 2 days later, Finn was moved to the boarding house, installed in the ground floor room that Mrs. Hernandez kept for guests who couldn't manage the stairs. Sophia had helped prepare the room, making sure it was comfortable and that everything he might need was within easy reach. The move exhausted him, despite the care taken by Doc Wilson and the 2 ranch hands who had come to assist. By the time he was settled in the bed, Finn was pale and sweating, clearly in pain despite his attempts to hide it. "I'll bring some broth later," Mrs. Hernandez said after the doctor had left, having given final instructions for Finn's care. "He needs to build his strength back up." Sophia nodded, her eyes on Finn's face as he drifted into an uneasy sleep. "I'll sit with him for a while," she said, "in case he needs anything when he wakes." Mrs. Hernandez gave her a knowing look but made no comment as she left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Alone with Finn, Sophia took the opportunity to study his face without his awareness. In repose, the lines of strain eased somewhat, making him look younger. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and she gently brushed it back, allowing her fingers to linger on his skin. "You're going to be just fine," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "And when you are, we have things to discuss, you and I." The following days fell into a pattern. Sophia would teach during the day, stopping by Finn's room during her midday break and spending her evenings with him after dinner. As he regained his strength, they talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future, and their thoughts on everything from books to politics. Finn was a surprisingly well-read man, despite his lack of formal education. He had a keen mind and strong opinions, though he expressed them with a humility that Sophia found endearing. "My pa always said a man who thinks he knows everything isn't learning anything," Finn told her one evening as they discussed a particularly contentious editorial in the local newspaper. "Your father sounds like a wise man," Sophia observed. "He was," Finn agreed, a shadow crossing his face. "He deserved better than what he got." Sophia waited, sensing there was more to the story. After a moment, Finn continued. "He worked himself to death trying to make that farm profitable," he said, his voice low. "Bad soil, bad weather, bad luck. He kept saying next year would be better, but it never was. By the end, he was just worn down to nothing." "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly, reaching for his hand. Finn squeezed her fingers, a sad smile on his face. "That's partly why I came west. I couldn't bear to watch another farm fail, to see my mother and sisters go hungry while we pretended everything was fine." "And have you found what you were looking for?" Sophia asked. Finn's eyes met hers, intense and searching. "I'm beginning to think I have," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of Mrs. Hernandez calling Sophia's name. "In here," Sophia called back, reluctantly withdrawing her hand from Finn's. "Mrs." Hernandez appeared in the doorway, an apologetic expression on her face. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Reynolds is here to see Finn." Sophia rose from her chair as a tall, well-dressed man entered the room. James Reynolds was one of the most prominent citizens of Las Lunas, owner of the largest cattle ranch in the area and, consequently, Finn's employer. "Mr. Reynolds," Finn said, straightening as much as his injured leg would allow. "This is a surprise." "O'Malley," Reynolds acknowledged with a nod. "You're looking better than I expected." "Thank you, sir," Finn replied. "I'm mending well." Reynolds turned his attention to Sophia. "Miss Clarke, I presume? My daughter speaks highly of you." "That's kind of her," Sophia said, extending her hand. "Eliza is a bright student. She takes after her mother," Reynolds said with a hint of pride. "Speaking of whom, Mrs. Reynolds asked me to deliver this." He produced a basket covered with a cloth. "Some of her preserves and fresh bread. She thought it might help with your recovery, O'Malley." "Please thank her for me," Finn said, clearly touched by the gesture. Reynolds nodded, then cleared his throat. "Miss Clarke, might I have a word with Finn alone? Ranch business." Though curious, Sophia nodded. "Of course. I should check my lesson plans for tomorrow anyway." As she left the room, she heard Reynolds say, "The men miss you, O'Malley. Things aren't running as smoothly without you." Sophia didn't linger to hear more, though she wondered what else Mr. Reynolds had come to discuss. She retreated to her own room upstairs, where she did indeed have lessons to prepare for the next day. It was nearly an hour before a knock at her door interrupted her work. Opening it, she found Mrs. Hernandez standing there. "Mr. Reynolds has left," the older woman informed her. "And Finn is asking for you." Sophia hurried back downstairs, curious about the conversation between Finn and his employer. She found Finn sitting up in bed, looking more animated than she had seen him since his accident. What did Mr. Reynolds want? She asked without preamble as she entered the room. Finn's face broke into a broad grin. "He offered me a promotion," he said. "Foreman of the entire ranch, not just the north section, with a raise and a cabin of my own on the property. Finn, that's wonderful." Sophia exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. "You deserve it." "There's more," Finn continued, his expression growing serious. "He said the cabin would be suitable for a family. I think it was his way of saying he approves of us spending time together." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "I see," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I'd think about it," Finn replied. "The promotion, I mean, the cabin." He trailed off, and Sophia finally looked up to find him watching her intently. "The cabin would depend on other factors," he finished softly. Sophia's heart began to race. "What factors?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Finn reached for her hand, drawing her closer to the bed. "Sophia," he said, his voice serious. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. When I thought I might die out there after the fall, all I could think about was you." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Finn, I'm not asking for anything right now," he hastened to add. "I know you're just beginning your life here, your teaching career. I just wanted you to know how I feel." Sophia looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "Since the day you saved my life, perhaps even before I was fully conscious of it." The joy that spread across Finn's face at her words was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Truly?" he asked, as if hardly daring to believe it. "Truly," Sophia confirmed, her own heart so full she thought it might burst. With a gentle tug on her hand, Finn drew her closer still, until she was perched on the edge of the bed beside him. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but deepened as Sophia responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly, and Finn's eyes had darkened to the color of the evening sky. "I've been wanting to do that since the night of our walk," he confessed, his voice husky. "Why didn't you?" Sophia asked, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Finn sighed, leaning into her touch. "I wasn't sure if you felt the same way. And I didn't want you to think I expected anything from you because of what happened with the snake bite." "Finn O'Malley," Sophia said firmly, "I am not in love with you because you saved my life. I'm in love with you because of who you are." The words had left her lips before she realized what she was saying. For a moment she froze, afraid she had been too forward, too presumptuous. But Finn's face lit up with such happiness that all her fears vanished. "You love me?" he asked, wonder in his voice. "I do," Sophia confirmed, finding the courage in his obvious joy. "I love you." "I love you too, Sophia Clarke," Finn declared, pulling her close for another kiss. "More than I ever thought possible." They spent the next hour talking about their feelings, about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together through a rattlesnake bite, and about what the future might hold. They agreed to take things slowly, to give themselves time to truly know each other before making any permanent decisions. "But I will accept that promotion," Finn said as the evening grew late. "And someday, if you'll have me, I'd like nothing more than to make that cabin a home for us both." Sophia's heart swelled at the thought. "I'd like that too," she said softly. "Someday." As autumn deepened into winter, Finn's leg healed steadily. By late October, he was able to move around with the aid of crutches, and by mid-November, he had progressed to using a cane. Doc Wilson was pleased with his recovery and predicted that by spring, Finn would be able to ride again. During his convalescence, Finn became a familiar figure at the schoolhouse, often helping Sophia after classes had ended for the day. The children adored him, especially the boys, who were fascinated by his stories of ranch life and cattle drives. Sophia flourished as a teacher, gaining the respect of both her students and their parents. The school board, impressed by her dedication and results, offered to renew her contract for the following year, which she gladly accepted. As Christmas approached, the town of Las Lunas prepared for its annual celebration. There would be a special church service, a community dinner, and a dance in the town hall. Despite his still healing leg, Finn was determined to attend the dance with Sophia. "Are you sure?" she asked as they discussed it one evening. They were sitting in the parlor of the boarding house, a checkerboard between them, though the game had been forgotten in favor of conversation. "Absolutely," Finn replied firmly. "I may not be able to do much dancing, but I want to be there with you." "People will talk," Sophia pointed out, though she was smiling, "even more than they already do." "Let them," Finn said with a shrug. "Everyone knows how I feel about you anyway." This was true. Their courtship, while conducted with appropriate propriety, was hardly a secret in a town the size of Las Lunas. Mrs. Hernandez had appointed herself unofficial chaperone, ensuring that their time together was always supervised, if discreetly so. The night of the dance arrived, cold and clear, with stars scattered like diamonds across the black velvet of the sky. Sophia wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, with a cream-colored shawl that Mrs. Hernandez had insisted on lending her. Finn, waiting in the parlor, stood as she descended the stairs. He was dressed in his Sunday best, his dark hair neatly combed, and though he still leaned on his cane, he stood straighter than she had seen him since before the accident. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his eyes warm with admiration. "Thank you," Sophia replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look quite handsome yourself." Mrs. Hernandez appeared from the kitchen, wrapped in a shawl of her own. "You two go ahead," she said. "I'll be along shortly with Mr. Peterson." The town hall was festively decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. A small band played at one end of the room, and tables laden with food and drink lined the walls. It seemed as though the entire population of Las Lunas had turned out for the event, the room buzzing with conversation and laughter. As Sophia and Finn entered, many heads turned in their direction. Sophia was conscious of the scrutiny, but found she didn't mind. Finn's steady presence beside her gave her confidence. They were greeted warmly by many of the townspeople, including Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, who had come in from their ranch for the occasion. Eliza, dressed in a pretty green dress, ran up to greet her teacher with excitement. "Miss Clarke." "You look so pretty," she exclaimed. "Mr. O'Malley, are you going to dance with Miss Clarke?" Finn chuckled, ruffling the girl's hair affectionately. "If she'll have me, though I might not be very graceful at the moment." "I think we can manage," Sophia said, smiling up at him. As the evening progressed, they did indeed dance, albeit carefully, with Finn setting his cane aside for a slow waltz. He was more steady on his feet than Sophia had expected, though she could tell he was in some pain by the end of the dance. "We should sit down," she suggested, concerned. Finn nodded, guiding her toward a bench along the wall. "Just for a bit," he agreed. "I'm not giving up on dancing with you entirely." They sat together, watching the other couples swirl around the floor. The mood was festive, with children darting between the dancers and older couples reminiscing about dances from years past. "I never thought I'd find this," Finn said suddenly, his voice low enough that only Sophia could hear. "Find what?" she asked, turning to look at him. "This feeling," he replied, his eyes on the dancers but his mind clearly elsewhere. "Belonging, purpose, hope for the future." He turned to meet her gaze. "You've given me that, Sophia." Sophia's heart swelled with emotion. "You've given me the same," she said softly. "When I came west, I was running away as much as I was running toward something new. But now," Finn prompted when she hesitated. "Now I feel like I've found my place in the world," she finished. "Here in Las Lunas, with you." Finn's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I was thinking," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Mr. Reynolds says the cabin will be ready by spring. By then, my leg should be fully healed." Sophia nodded, her heart beginning to race as she sensed what was coming. "I know we agreed to take things slowly," Finn continued, "and if you need more time, I understand. But I love you, Sophia Clarke, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." With some difficulty due to his still healing leg, Finn shifted so that he was facing her more fully. "What I'm trying to ask, not very gracefully, is if you would consider becoming my wife. Not right away if you're not ready, but—" "Yes," Sophia interrupted, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. "Yes, Finn O'Malley, I will marry you." For a moment, Finn looked stunned, as if he hadn't dared to hope for such an immediate acceptance. Then his face broke into a radiant smile that took Sophia's breath away. "You're certain?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "It won't be an easy life." "The cabin's small and ranch work is hard, I'm certain," Sophia assured him, squeezing his hand. "I love you, and I want to build a life with you, whatever that may bring." Finn leaned forward and kissed her, heedless of the many eyes that were undoubtedly watching. It was a brief kiss, appropriate for a public setting but filled with promise. When they parted, Finn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he admitted, opening the pouch to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's. She sent it when I wrote to tell her about you." Sophia gasped softly as he slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "She wants to meet you," Finn said, watching her admire the ring. "She wrote that any woman who could survive a rattlesnake bite and tame her wild son must be quite remarkable." Sophia laughed, wiping away a happy tear. "I look forward to meeting her someday." Their private moment was interrupted as Mrs. Hernandez approached, her sharp eyes immediately spotting the ring on Sophia's finger. "So, you finally asked her," she said to Finn, her stern tone belied by the twinkle in her eye. "It's about time." Word of their engagement spread quickly through the gathering. There were congratulations, well wishes, and more than a few knowing looks from those who had been watching their courtship unfold over the past months. As the evening drew to a close, Sophia and Finn stood outside the town hall, gazing up at the star-filled sky. The air was cold, their breath forming small clouds in front of them, but Sophia felt warm with happiness. "Spring seems so far away," she said, leaning against Finn's side. He put his arm around her, drawing her closer. "It'll be here before we know it," he replied. "And in the meantime, we have plans to make." They decided on an April wedding after the spring roundup but before the busiest time at the ranch. Sophia would continue teaching until the end of the school year in May, after which she would move to the cabin with Finn. The school board, though disappointed to lose her, understood and began the search for a new teacher. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations and anticipation. Finn's leg continued to heal, and by February he was walking without the cane most days. He returned to light duties at the ranch, though Mr. Reynolds insisted he not push himself too hard. Sophia divided her time between teaching, preparing for the wedding, and helping Finn with the cabin whenever she could visit the ranch. The small structure was sturdy and well built, with 2 rooms and a covered porch. Together, they made plans for curtains, furniture, and the garden Sophia hoped to plant once they were settled. Letters arrived from Finn's mother and sisters in Kentucky, expressing their delight at his engagement and their regret at not being able to travel for the wedding. Mrs. O'Malley sent a beautiful handmade quilt as a wedding gift, along with recipes and advice for her future daughter-in-law. Sophia wrote back warmly, sharing stories of Las Lunas and assuring Mrs. O'Malley that her son was loved and well respected in his adopted home. As winter gave way to spring, the land around Las Lunas came alive with wildflowers and new growth. The date of the wedding approached, bringing with it a growing excitement not just for Sophia and Finn, but for the entire town, which had embraced their love story as a symbol of hope and new beginnings. The day before the wedding, Sophia stood in the schoolhouse after the children had gone, looking around at the place that had been the center of her life for the past 8 months. She would miss teaching, though she had promised to help her replacement settle in and had not ruled out returning to education in some capacity in the future. Having second thoughts, came a familiar voice from the doorway. Sophia turned to see Finn standing there, hat in hand, watching her with a mixture of love and concern. "Not at all," she assured him, crossing the room to greet him with a kiss. "Just saying goodbye to this chapter of my life before starting the next." "A good chapter, I hope," Finn said, his arms encircling her waist. "The best," Sophia replied sincerely. "It brought me to you after all." The wedding took place the next day in the small church in Las Lunas. Sophia wore a new dress of ivory silk, ordered specially from Santa Fe, with a crown of spring flowers in her hair. Finn, standing at the altar in a new suit, watched her walk toward him with an expression of such love and wonder that Sophia felt her heart might burst with happiness. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They exchanged vows and rings before the assembled townspeople, who had come to celebrate with them. Sophia saw Mrs. Hernandez dabbing at her eyes in the front row, and even the usually stoic Mr. Reynolds appeared moved by the proceedings. Afterward, there was a reception at the town hall, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the population of Las Lunas. Sophia and Finn danced together, his leg now strong enough to support him through several turns around the floor. "Mrs. O'Malley," Finn murmured as they swayed to a slow melody, "I still can't believe you're my wife." "Believe it," Sophia replied, her eyes shining with happiness. "I'm yours and you're mine from this day forward." As the celebration continued around them, Sophia found herself thinking of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A rattlesnake bite that could have ended her life had instead led her to the greatest love she had ever known. The poison that might have killed her had been drawn out by the man who now held her in his arms, the man who had become her husband. "What are you thinking about?" Finn asked, noticing her momentary distraction. Sophia smiled up at him, her heart full. "I was thinking that sometimes the most dangerous moments in our lives lead us to the most beautiful destinations." Finn nodded, understanding immediately. "That rattlesnake did us both a favor in a strange way," he said with a wry smile, "though I wouldn't recommend it as a way to meet someone." Sophia laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the crowded room. "No, once was quite enough for me." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows of the town hall, Finn and Sophia said their goodbyes to the wedding guests and departed for their cabin on the Reynolds ranch. Mr. Reynolds had insisted they take his carriage, decorated with ribbons and flowers by Eliza and the other schoolchildren. The cabin welcomed them with the golden light of lamps that Mrs. Reynolds had thoughtfully lit in anticipation of their arrival. Inside, everything was ready for the beginning of their life together. A small table set with a white cloth and a vase of wildflowers, the handmade quilt from Finn's mother spread across the bed in the adjoining room, and a fire laid ready in the hearth. Finn lit the fire while Sophia removed her flower crown, setting it carefully on the table. When he turned back to her, the firelight cast a warm glow on her face, illuminating the love and anticipation in her eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. O'Malley," he said softly, crossing the room to take her in his arms. "Home," Sophia repeated, the word filled with promise. "I like the sound of that." As they stood together in the firelight, Sophia thought of the long journey that had brought her to this moment. The loss of her parents, the decision to leave Boston, the treacherous travel west, and the rattlesnake that had nearly ended her life but had instead led her to love. Every step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to bring her here, to this cabin, to this man, to this new beginning. "I love you, Finn O'Malley," she whispered against his lips. "And I love you, Sophia O'Malley," he replied, his voice filled with a joy that echoed in her own heart. Now and always. In the years that followed, Sophia and Finn built a life together that exceeded even their most hopeful dreams. The small cabin expanded as their family grew, first with the arrival of their son, James, in the spring of 1877, followed by twin daughters, Elizabeth and Mary, in the summer of 1879. Finn thrived as the foreman of the Reynolds ranch, eventually buying a parcel of land adjacent to it, where he and Sophia established their own modest cattle operation. Sophia returned to teaching part-time once the children were old enough, sharing her knowledge and love of learning with a new generation of Las Lunas children. The town grew and changed around them, with a railroad spur arriving in 1882, bringing new people and opportunities. Through it all, Finn and Sophia remained a constant, their love deepening with each passing year, each challenge overcome, each joy shared. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the children were asleep and they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Sophia would trace the faint scars on her ankle, remembering the day that had changed the course of her life. And Finn, noticing, would take her hand in his, a silent acknowledgement of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. They never forgot the rattlesnake that had nearly taken Sophia's life, but had instead given them each other. It became part of their family lore, a story told to their children and later their grandchildren. How Sophia had been bitten with no doctor for miles, and how Finn had said, "Let me," and drawn the poison out, saving her life and beginning a love story that would span decades. And in that love, they found a truth as old as the New Mexico wilderness itself. That sometimes the most deadly poison can lead to the sweetest remedy, and that love, when it finds you, is worth every risk.